Welcome. If you're a woman who has a sense that there's more out there for you, you're in the right place. I'm Whitney Baker, host of the Electric Ideas podcast. Somewhere along the line of work and kids, life carried on, but I lost track of my truth. I'm on a reflective journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. Each week, I interview a woman who is lighting her own path and offering others hope. Before our conversation ends, we'll share a reflective question for you to explore. Sometimes all we need is a jolt, a fresh idea, an aha moment that connects us to a sense of possibility. This, my friends, is what I call an electric idea. Welcome back to Electric Ideas. I'm your host, Whitney Baker, and today's episode is for all the moms who feel like they are just in the thick of it. I'm joined by Mary Catherine Starr, the author of Mama Needs a Minute. When I was reading her book, I had so many moments of not knowing whether I wanted to laugh or cry, because she cuts to the heart of topics that are so important to me, like mental load of motherhood, invisible labor, and all the ways gender dynamics quietly shift after kids using humor. I know this episode is going to make you feel seen as likely the household manager, emotional regulator, grocery shopper, trying to take care of your own self at the same time mom that many of us are. And I hope it reminds you that, well, incredible and beautiful, that motherhood can also be extremely challenging on our minds and bodies. I know you're going to have so many good takeaways, so let's get into it. Hi, Mary Catherine. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I want to dive into the time when you started making comics about the mental load of motherhood as just kind of a way to be honest and use your talents and connect with other moms. And it definitely struck a major chord. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to do this and why you think it caught so much attention?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I should say I completely fell into this. This is not like something I set out to do. I've talked to other moms who are like, oh, I wanted to be a comic artist since I was a kid. Not me at all. I mean, I was an art and English double major. So I guess those two things do kind of come together in my book and in my comics. But at the time I started making these comics, I was really just looking for a way to talk about the really hard parts of motherhood. I was in the thick of it, like the early years. And I actually started making them just a couple months before the pandemic started. So my daughter was 3, my son was like less than 6 months. And I was just in that part of motherhood where you're just like kind of holding on for dear life. And I had a personal blog that I'd been doing for years and years. I was like one of those old school bloggers. I would talk a lot about motherhood there and about the challenging parts of it. But I never felt like I had the right imagery to share with that. Because I'd be writing this long post about how much I was struggling or how frustrated I was or how overwhelmed I felt. And then I put this like beautiful picture of me and my baby up with it. When it just felt very like it didn't really connect. And so I just started like drawing little, at the time I was just kind of thinking of them more as illustrations, just kind of illustrating in a much more like just fun way what it looks like to be in the throes of motherhood. So I'd always draw this mom with like stains all over her and her hair all crazy and like people pulling on her. And that I was just kind of trying to capture the insanity of those early days. And so I would do drawings like that. And then I would share it with a caption that talked about whatever challenge I wanted to discuss. And I found quickly that as I shared those to my personal Instagram, which at the time was just pictures of my kids and life, every once in a while I would share one of these little illustrations and talk about motherhood. And I saw really quickly that they were being shared far and wide and way more than my normal posts were. And so I just kind of was like, oh, these are connecting with people. And I was seeing a real response from my tiny little community at the time of people saying like, oh my God, I love these. They really speak to me and really represent what I'm feeling. And for me, they were a really kind of therapeutic, fun, creative outlet. And like I said, I started them just a couple months before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit and we were all losing our minds, they were like, I would shut myself in my office and I'd like draw. And it was just like a really therapeutic outlet for me and just a creative outlet. And so I kept doing them. And after doing them for 6, 7, 8 months, I started thinking, okay, this seems like there's something here. Maybe I should make this into its own Instagram account and just kind of give these comics a place to live on their own. And so I did that, and that's the rest is history. Like I kept doing it. I was very devoted. It wasn't like it just fell into my lap. I was like working all the time on these comics. I started finding a lot of purpose in making them. I was creating this community of moms who were all connecting over these topics that I'd been really struggling with, but didn't know how to talk about. And now I had this way to talk about it that people were responding to. Was posting comics 3, 4 times a week for a very long time before one of my comics went viral. That was in January 2022. So it was like 2 years after I started making them. And that's when things really changed for me
Sure.
as an artist and creator. But yeah, I mean, it all started really from just like me looking for a way to express my frustration, my overwhelm, and this sense of like, am I alone? Why is this so hard for me?
Yes, it was a true case of the cliche, pictures can capture 1,000 words. Because some of the things, like, I'll give a small example because they're visual. So just so you guys who aren't familiar with Mary Catherine's work, she's written a book called Mama Needs a Minute, and it's this really interesting mix between her illustrated comics that are hilarious and also heartbreaking and
Yeah.
true with their truths and a lot of insights. But one of the comics, just to give an example, that was very popular early on, showed kind of the double standard of parenting. And it had a kind of image of dad bringing Carrie out on the left. And it was like, oh, fun dad. And then on the right, it was mom doing the same thing. And it was like, oh, lazy mom. And I feel like that just cracked open some truths.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you see that mom and dad are doing the exact same thing. And I think the simplicity of the drawings, like it's just like they're super simple. It's just like an outline of a mom versus outline doing of a dad, but they're doing the exact same thing. And when you see them labeled above with just like a 1 or 2 word label of how people would judge or how they would feel when they see the exact same parent doing, I mean, the parent doing the exact same thing. I just think there's something about that like just strikes a chord. It's kind of like an aha moment for people who maybe have been feeling that double standard, but have never actually kind of seen it laid out in that way or put a name to it.
Yeah. Just to give another example, it was maybe, and I'm paraphrasing here, but maybe a dad takes time off work to come to a kid's concert or something like that. And there's a big cheering section and like, wow, what an involved dad. And then the mom is, that's just what moms do.
There's a million examples. I love this about all the comics that I make is that after I share them, kind of in the comments and the community that's come up around them, people have thousands of other examples and they all share them. And it's like this real kind of like, again, it's like we all just start to go, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. I hadn't even thought about that. Because I think we internalize a lot of this too. There have been many times that I've seen a dad doing something and thought to myself, like, wow, look at him. And then I have to check myself and go, oh my God, that's what moms do every single day, all the time. And so I think as a culture, we've just kind of been indoctrinated into this mindset that like dads doing anything for their kids is miraculous. And honestly, moms, we judge them for a lot of the same exact stuff that we praise dads for. So it's been really eye opening for me too, as people share their own stories to go, oh my God, I hadn't even thought about that. That's another double standard. They are the gift that keep on giving. There's so many
Yeah.
double standards. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you used comedy as a way to open up these important conversations. I know in the book you talk a lot about how pre kids, you felt like you had a pretty fair relationship when it came to managing household duties, and that it was almost sneaky how much your mental load creep in household management and activities director roles crept. Can you talk about why you think domestic labor still falls so squarely on women's shoulders, despite the amount of women who are in the workforce? And also why it can sneak up on us?
Yes. I mean, this is one of my favorite things to talk about because I do think I was really proud of my relationship before we had kids in terms of how equal it was. I felt like we were this very modern, feminist type relationship. My husband and I lived together for many years before we got married, and we were in apartment buildings. We would do our laundry side by side in like our apartment laundry room. Like we'd carry our baskets down. He had his, I had mine. We would go change them over. We'd fold them side by side. We grocery shop together every Sunday. We had this life where we just kind of did it all together or really shared in the household responsibilities. And I just assumed that because we set up our life that way, that's how it would always be. But I think that's one of the reasons that motherhood felt so shocking to me. Because although I didn't wake up overnight and all of a sudden I was doing everything, I did feel like a year or two into being a mom, I kind of looked around and realized how much more I had taken on. And it was like a big part of like these comics and this book was really peeling back the layers and saying like, why? How did that happen? At first it's like, why did I let that happen? Or what made that happen? And I think there's a lot of reasons, and I do like go into them in a lot of depth in the book. But, I think the biggest reason that I've seen, especially now talking to so many moms too, is that our world is set up, our society is structured in a way that really kind of pigeonholes moms, like the way in which the expectations that we have for parents, again, the double standards for parents, and then also just the way that like our society is set up in terms of parental leave or who ends up being the parent who most of the time is able to make their work more flexible or go part-time or change their work schedule in a way that they can be with the kids more. So much of that kind of stuff ends up falling on mom. And I think when you are the person who, in our case, and my husband and I's case, I work for myself. When we decided to have kids, I decided that I would keep working, but work around the kids' schedule. So I'll work more in the evenings and I can get part-time childcare and I can work when she's napping. And I had all these ideas of like how my flexible schedule would be this total gift to me as a mom. But what I didn't realize was that also meant that I would be the main person home with our daughter, which I loved, but I would start to set up systems in the house. I would start to become much more competent because my husband's job wasn't very flexible and he didn't have that ability. I became the default parent. I became the primary caregiver, which was fine. We kind of agreed on that. But what I didn't realize was that when you become the primary caregiver, not only do you start to become much more competent as a parent, the child starts to prefer you more, or at least in our case, that happened. And I know it happens for a lot of families, which makes it a lot harder for the partner to then take on some of that stuff when they are around in terms of caregiving. And then also the societal expectations of like, the mom's the one to take the kid to the doctor. The mom's the one to call about scheduling the appointments. There's all these other external expectations that kind of compound the issue. And then we bring into it like the guilt, the mom guilt, and the feelings of needing to do it all or be perfect that so many of us moms have that, again, I think come from these expectations. We've seen what moms quote unquote should be the ones to do. And it's been modeled to us our whole lives that moms are the ones who take care of the kids. Moms are the nurturers. Moms are the ones who are supposed to do the back to school shopping and make sure kids are eating healthy meals and taking them to all their appointments. And so when you see all that modeled for you, you also feel that pressure to be the one to do that. So I think even moms who don't have a flexible schedule are still usually the ones taking off of work to make this stuff happen or squeezing it in the margins of their life because they feel it is their job, even if intellectually they know it's not. I mean, there's so much. I mean, I could go on and on for hours about what I think leads to this, but I do think that because it's a slippery slope for a lot of us where we just take on, as the kids get older, we take on another thing and then another thing. At first, it might just be that I have more parental leave, or maybe in my case, my daughter breastfed and never took a bottle. So I was the one kind of taking on the feeding, or I was home more with my flexible schedule. So I just started doing her laundry with mine. With all the little things that you do at the beginning, that as your child gets older, they get bigger and bigger. So what was once breastfeeding then becomes making baby food and then becomes, or procuring baby food if you're not making it. And then it becomes making sure your kids are eating healthy and then introducing new foods. And that just grows and grows until all of a sudden you realize, like, why am I the only one responsible for every single thing that goes in my child's mouth? I never signed up for that, right? So there's so many examples, but I really just think that it's a slow, slippery slope down back into those traditional gender roles that so many of us never thought we'd be in. And I think that's a shock to a lot of us who are like modern women who do work outside the home and thought that we were in really non-traditional, much more modern relationships.
I love that part of your book because you take a deep dive like back into your story and walk really through step by step of your parenthood journey of like, how did this happen? And you're questioning even in this relationship where you feel like you've got a modern feminist, your husband wants to support you, you both want to be in the marriage, and you're still experiencing this. So you really unpeeled the onion. What was really kind of coming up for me is your message. A lot of us are so grateful to stand on the shoulders of so many women who did trailblaze and got us to this point. I mean, it really hasn't even historically been that long that we're able to have choice. And so I celebrate that. But like you, I wanted to do both. I knew I wanted to be a present mother, but I also really felt called to contribute outside of the home. And oh my gosh, way harder than I ever thought it would be. You talk a little specifically about how the you can do anything message forgets to mention some key points for moms. Is there anything on that part of the book that you'd like to touch on that you feel like we haven't talked about yet?
I love the idea that we can do it all. I do. I mean, I grew up on that idea and I really bought into it. I truly thought like it is absolutely possible to be a mom who works outside the home and a really present, loving mother who does all the arts and crafts and homework with your kid. And like, I didn't even question that. And it wasn't until I was like trying to juggle everything that I started realizing, like, oh, this isn't possible, at least not in the way that I thought it was. And so I think there are a lot of messages that were kind of left out of that battle cry that so many of us kind of grew up with. I think one of them is that we left out the fact that in order for us to do it all, we were going to have partners who stepped up a lot. I think young boys or our peers, if you're talking about millennials or something, like our peers that were men or boys were not raised with the messaging like that in order for your wife to do it all, you're going to have to do a lot more around the house and the expectations for you are going to skyrocket. I think a lot of men, dads now are comparing themselves to their dads, and they do so much more than their dads did, which is awesome. And I'm so glad that we've come so far. But they're comparing themselves to their dads. So they're like, I'm doing so much more than any other generations of dads did. What's the problem here? Versus us moms who are now working outside the home, who are a lot of us comparing ourselves to our moms who perhaps were full-time stay-at-home moms. And so we're comparing ourselves to something that is impossible to do when you're working outside the home. And they're comparing themselves to like this old school idea of a father who really didn't do anything with his kids or did very little, depending on how you were raised. And so there's a big disconnect there that we have not figured out. And I think that that causes a lot of tension in a lot of relationships. I also think that conversation of you can do it all left out kind of the feelings of guilt that we would be left with as moms, this feeling like we're always failing at everything because it's impossible to do it all at the standard we usually uphold for ourselves. I think that's a huge part. We didn't know that in order to do it all, that means we'd be chronically exhausted and anxious because we can't possibly get everything on our list done. It's like, yes, we can theoretically do both, of course, but are we going to ever be able to do them both in a way that where we're feeling good about ourselves or where we're feeling a sense of peace or where we can get 8 hours of sleep? Like, I don't think in our current structure, our current society, moms can do it all without making some huge sacrifices. And I think we're all still trying to figure out, like, what can we sacrifice in order to work outside the home and be the kind of mom we want? I haven't found the answer. I'm always trying to kind of figure out how to make this all work in a way that feels good.
Yeah, it's always a work in progress at my house as well. I think that do it all message is kind of like, yeah, but unless you figure out some real help and really have candid conversations and have, first of all, you have a partner and then that partner can really step it up in meaningful ways, do it all. But if you're going to, it's quite possibly going to be at the expense of your physical and mental health. And
Right.
that,
Yes. Yes, exactly. And I think that's why so many moms do take a step back. Even if they love their job and they really planned on always being a full-time working parent, so many moms end up finding themselves a couple of years into motherhood making that hard choice to step back from maybe this career that they love. For that very reason, they're like, my mental health is suffering or my physical health is suffering so much. I have no choice. And I'm not going to quit on my kids or I'm not going to pull back from
right.
mothering. So it feels like this. So many moms are left with this impossible choice of like, what do I choose here in order to protect my sanity? And I think that's a really unfair decision, especially when we grew up thinking we could do it all. And so many of us want to do both things.
You touched a little bit on mom guilt. Why do you think mom guilt is so intense and universal for moms, but doesn't impact most dads in the same way?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, my husband and I talk about this all the time because he has like no guilt and it shocks me. He's always like, you do everything with like guilt behind it. And I'm like, how do you do nothing with guilt behind it? But I think so much of the mom guilt, at least I can speak for myself that I experience, is this feeling that I'm not living up to the standards that I wanted to live up to, or that I'm not doing it right or doing enough as a mother. And I think that does come from my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and there's obviously issues with everything, but she was so present to the point where I think she sacrificed a lot of her own life for us, which I don't think is healthy. But I think I expected myself to be able to always be right there when the kids get home from school, making them a healthy snack, just totally present. Now let's focus on homework all together all night. Let's do art projects. But like the reality is I don't have the bandwidth to do that all the time. And often when they get home, I'm like rushing to finish up my last few things for my work. And then I close up my computer, but I still feel like I'm pulled in that direction and I'm stressed about it, or I'm trying to finish something for a client. And then they're a mess because they're tired. And then I'm not the mom I want to be in that moment because I'm frazzled and they're frazzled or whatever. And maybe I yell, or maybe I feel anxious, or maybe I'm not as present as I'd like. And then I start beating up on myself and I feel guilty. Like, why am I not able to be that Instagram mom or that super present mom or the gentle parent that I follow who I think is so great. But, my husband doesn't have any of that. He has no expectations for himself because he already is doing so much better than his dad did. He feels pretty good about his parenting. He's not following 100 parenting experts who tell him the right way to do things. He's just kind of looking at sports stuff on his phone. So he's just not steeped in this world of parenting and how to do it right and how you could be failing your kids. And I think also he grew up as a man in this world. And so he wasn't really taught to judge himself about everything and try to always be perfect and try to be a people pleaser and try to make sure that everyone around him is happy. I think that's such a part of being a woman is we're just taught to be really aware of everybody else's feelings and make sure we're taking care of everyone. And so I think there's so many reasons, but I think that we are in this perfect storm with the internet, with social media, with so many of us taking a different path than maybe we saw modeled to us when we were young, that it just leaves us moms feeling like we're failing or we're dropping a ball. And we feel guilty about that. And we feel like we're cheating our children. And I don't think we are, but I think that intellectually we can believe one thing and then emotionally it can be a completely different experience. I know that I'm modeling, how important it is to have a life outside of your kids as a mom. I think that is wonderful. I know that they see me loving my work. I want to do that. And yet I still feel guilty every single time I have to go work and not be with them. So it's both things.
It's so complicated. It's a complicated soup. And I think about it all the time. I'm fortunate enough to have a partner who, similarly to your husband, wants to be involved, is trying to help. But I still feel like the invisible part of motherhood is what's hard to pass on. I'll give you an example from my life. And my kids are older and they help and they're self-sufficient. We have a setup where on Wednesdays, my husband now, since the pandemic, works from home. And I was like, you know what? It would be life-changing for me to go early, do my normal yoga class and start work and just have one morning off. So that's been a wonderful solve. It's been a midweek reboot. It's been a wonderful practice for our family. But it was picture day this morning. And I have 2 junior high girls. So last night I was really looking forward to my Wednesday routine, but okay, one of them wanted their hair straightened in the morning. And I was like, okay, I can't pass that on. But before bed, I was like, I don't want to mental load you right before bed, but there's a couple things that need to happen. And of course, I'd done most of the laundry because I wanted to make sure they could pick out their outfit. We know how that goes.
That's very important.
And the one t-shirt that needed to be worn today was needing to be washed. So I'm like, no problem. I guess we'll just throw it in. Dad can put it in right in the morning. And I was trying to be like, I'm going to do yoga at home. I'm going to do your hair. But otherwise, I'm not here. I'm at work. Lo and behold, my husband, I go down to get coffee and he's like, what was it that you needed me to do this morning? And I'm like, the shirt.
Yes.
I think that's when it's hard because I forget things sometimes too, but when your kids become the consequence and it causes stress for them, that's where I feel like the moms are just ah.
Yeah, and that's when the moms say it's easier just to do it myself. I mean, because I think I hear that so much from moms. I'm trying to delegate, or my partner wants to do more, or he says he's going to take it on, then he forgets. And then it just creates more work for me, and I'm angry at him. So it's easier sometimes to just do it. And I think that's where we get into this really tricky situation. Because us moms are used to functioning on this really high level in terms of thinking ahead about all the stuff our kids might need for the whole week. And is it ready? Is it prepared? We've been practicing this for their kids' whole lives. So even if your partner is ready to take stuff on, there's a training period. And a lot of us don't want to get through that training period. Rightfully so, because it just makes our lives so much more stressful. And if you're already at the edge where you have 0 left to give, sometimes it feels easier. I'll just do it. I'm just going to remember to do that shirt the first thing when I wake up because I don't want to have to stress about whether or not it gets done. There's so many things like that. They just keep on coming. And that's where moms end up feeling like they're just drowning all the time because it's there's too much to keep in our heads. And even when we delegate often, we feel like we can't let it go.
I want to make a nuanced point, though. So one of the terms I liked that you brought up in the book is gatekeeping. And I will say that I think that this can go too far. I want a modern relationship. I wasn't hard on my husband this morning. I'm like, you know what? I'm glad he's rolling up his sleeves and he's trying. He does a lot. But this idea sometimes that you just touched on, I do feel like we need to own our part of the equation if we want things to be better. And for me, that's been some unlearning that my husband can handle things in his own way, and it might not be how I would do it, but me micromanaging it doesn't really take it off my mental list at all.
Yeah.
And you also talk about gatekeeping. And I feel like some women get so used to doing it all that they really don't let help in or they can't resist from nitpicking. And I think that's kind of annoying, to be honest. Don't complain then. It's slippery. But
Yeah.
can you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think maternal gatekeeping is so hard because I always, when I talk about it, I want to be like so careful to not like victim blame because
Yes.
I think
Yes.
ultimately, right, like moms are like kind of oppressed or taken advantage of just in our, not by their husbands, but just by like our societal expectations and these roles that we've been put into, right? We're doing tons of unpaid labor and everyone is benefiting from it. And often women are the ones suffering, right? So I don't want to ever blame moms for this dynamic 'cause I think for the most part, it is not any individual's fault. But I think that when we start to look closer at the individual dynamics in our household, there can be places where we can learn to pull back a little bit in order to maybe let our husband step forward a little bit. So I think that's like, for me, there are definitely some places as I've looked more closely at our household situation where I've seen, okay, my husband can do this. And when I'm not around, this is how I know. When I'm not around, it's fine. When I'm
Mm,
home and the kids want me to do it, right? Or when they have a choice between the two of us and my way is the quote unquote right way, and then I try to help my husband figure it out, that's where we run into issues. But if I'm not here, he will figure it out and they will be okay. If he burns their toast and they don't eat breakfast because they don't like the toast he made them, they'll figure it out. He'll give them something else to eat later, or he'll make them a bigger lunch, or they'll fall apart and he'll learn his lesson or whatever. Like he will figure it out. And so instead of before I leave, saying, okay, if you're going to make them toast, make sure you only do it like this. And if you don't do it like this, then they were not going to eat it. And da, da, da. I can get really bogged down in that stuff. And it causes me anxiety and it makes him feel totally micromanaged. So can I let go of some of that and just let him figure it out? Like you were saying, I used to like, this isn't necessarily maternal gatekeeping, but like I hardly left because I felt like I couldn't leave. Like when my kids were young, I felt like they just can't handle it without me. I know how to do everything the right way. And if I leave, all chaos will break loose and everyone will get off their sleep schedules and no one will eat and everyone's going to be a mess and I'm going to have to pay for it. Right. And instead of leaving and giving my husband the chance to like really learn how to do this stuff on his own and the kids learn how to do it with him, I like created this dynamic where I was indispensable to the family and I couldn't leave. So I think there are just a lot of ways that if we start to look a little closer, we can see where we might be playing a part in making things harder for ourselves. And I did that out of survival. I was in survival mode. I came from a good place, right? Like
yeah.
in the early years of mothering, when my daughter didn't take a bottle and she was colicky and she didn't sleep for more than 30 minutes at a time, like if I left, it wouldn't have worked. I could not leave. So I kind of learned like I am so necessary here that I just like dug in. And it came from this place of needing to survive. But as my kids got older, like I wasn't pulling myself out of the equation enough. It was like I was staying deep in there because I felt like that was the only way we can make this as a family because it was so hard. But I think I was still kind of in like that trauma response from that crazy hard first year that I just didn't know where I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, I think I just think that like it's if you're a person who is type A or really sensitive to kind of external pressures or expectations, or you have that tendency already to be someone who does micromanage or who feels like you're the only one who can do it the right way. Like I think motherhood it can be a really intense experience with learning how to let go and let other people care for your child or let other people do things their way. My kids are 9 and 6, and I'm still working on this all the time.
What is something in your motherhood journey you wish you would have unlearned sooner?
Well, I mean, that's a big one is like giving myself more space from my kids. I do that so much more now, and everyone is healthier for it. I feel like before, when my kids were really young, only time I would really leave was like if I had to do something for work or if I was like going to do a quick workout. But like otherwise, I was always with them. And as they've gotten older, I've made my social life much more a bigger priority. I talk about that in the book, like finding mom friends who are in it with me and women I connect with and taking regular time to be with them has been like life-changing to me. And taking time to go, to go do a yoga class or Pilates class, I do that a lot. And that's like the kids still complain every time I leave, but like I'm used to it now and I can handle it and I'm gone for an hour and a half. Everybody will be okay. Like there's so much of that. I wish I'd learned earlier on that like it is so important for me to have a life outside of motherhood as a person, not just a person who works, but as like a human being who has relationships and experiences. And I'm still working on that, but I've unlearned a lot of that and then it's made a big
Yeah.
difference. Yeah.
I mean, that really resonates with me and speaks into the lot of the work I do with women because I think sometimes when you're a mom and you're a mom who's working outside of the home, you're so busy focused on those roles that it's easy to lose who you are outside of
Yeah.
those huge roles you're playing, especially amidst the demands of early childhood. So
Yeah, and I think for me, like, before kids, I got so much of my joy in life from my friendships. That was, like, such a big part of my life. And then I became a mom, and it kind of just, like, chopped it all off. It's like, no time for that anymore, and I think that was really detrimental, and there were so many things I did like that. Before having kids, I mean, I was practicing yoga 5, 6 times a week in a class with another teacher. Like, really, that was, like, a huge place for my mental health where I spent so much time, and then after I had kids, it, like, just again, like, disappeared. I was still doing exercise and I was still doing yoga every once in a while and I was still teaching the classes I teach, but nothing for myself. And so, I mean, I know we talk forever about moms and self-care, but I think it's more than that. To me, it feels like it's a really intentional choice to remove yourself from, for a lot of women, is this very intense part of your life, and go like have some space to be a person. I think it's easier said than done, but I think ultimately taking more space for myself is better for my entire family, including my husband and his parenting and his being more active part of the household.
that's beautiful. I know we're coming up on time, but for the women who are listening to this and are like, wow, yes, this is so relatable. We talked a little bit about as you have kids, kind of deciding, can I go back to work? And I've played every role. I've worked 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, intentional pause, freelance. Now we're in my own company. So I
Yeah.
know how it goes. I've navigated that. I think it's an interesting juncture for women who have leaned back and now kind of want to lean in more to work, but
Mhm.
they've taken on the load and they are realizing, okay, I've got to start unraveling some of this or getting more support from my partner or somewhere in order to step back into some of my professional work that I miss.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard. What advice do you have for those women who feel like, well, the ship sailed, like I can't pass this on now? Where could they begin to have those tough conversations?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. I mean, there are lots of resources now, I think, in this area and more coming. There's so many great people you can follow on social media. The book Fair Play, some people love it, some people don't. It can really work for some couples, but I think your partner has to be pretty ready for it. And I think a lot of women will read it and be fired up and then try to get their partner involved, and it just doesn't happen. So that is one resource that can be great for some people. But it definitely, no matter what, that book, I think, is helpful at thinking of your family unit and your household as like running it more in like a business sense, where it's like not in the relationship way that you look at the tasks that it go into really running a household and making it function, and you break them down into these like delegatable division things you can divide up, and really take ownership of. And so I think that is one place that can be helpful for people, is helping their to show their partner that like how much they're doing to put the mental load down on paper. So that book and those cards can be helpful for some couples. And also, I mean, I'm like a huge believer in couples therapy, and I know a lot of people aren't. Like in my case, that's been a game changer because when I got to this point where I was feeling so frustrated and overwhelmed all the time, I was just really resentful of my husband. When it was really hard for me to explain why. And obviously, I've done so much work in this area now that we have a much better dialogue about this kind of thing. But I think, not to like say my comics solve everything, but I think something like I love the way that comics, you can show them to a partner and you can both laugh and you could say, oh my God, look at this is us. And then kind of get deeper into it and have a real conversation. Like, I think that there are a lot of people sharing content around this, whether it's memes or whether it's videos talking about the mental load or talking about these double standards. I think there are a lot of great people to follow online that can be a great way to introduce your partner to these conversations and to these terms without it feeling like aggressive and angry, but with it feeling more like, oh my gosh, this is how I feel. And I'd never really been able to explain it before. And let's talk about it. You know, the term mental load and invisible labor and emotional labor, these are all weaponized incompetence. These are things that are now, I think, much more common terms, and women are starting to really like awaken to these things that we've been feeling. Now we have names for them. We can label them and we can say, I'm struggling with this exact same thing too. And I think having a name for it and being able to take this information to our partners and talk about it in a more, for lack of a better word, like academic way, I think can take some of the emotion out of it and make it more of like a, let's tackle this household or this business of our family together in a way that makes us both feel good about it and one person not feel like they're being taken advantage of.
I agree. And it's a more empowered way to have a conversation. It doesn't feel like an attack. doesn't feel like a guilt trip or a complaint. It's like, okay, let's take a look at this. I'm glad we have the language we do now as well.
Yeah. And I just want to also say, I always want to be careful to make sure people know that, like, I don't feel like I've got this all figured out at all. This is our journey and how we got to this place that so many couples find themselves in. And this is kind of how we're starting to like dig ourselves out of this hole. But I don't think we have it fully figured out. I mean, we're still in couples therapy working on it. We have conversations about the mental load probably every day. And I mean, we have a lot of fun with it. Like my husband also will be like, I'm carrying the mental load of that. And I'm like, I know you are. Thank you. And so like, it's very much like just like common terminology in our house now. But we do a lot more like trying to thank each other for the invisible stuff the other person's doing and really like naming like, okay, so you've got all that. You're handling start to finish, conception, execution, planning, all of it of this task. Great. I'm taking it off my list. I'm not going to worry about it. There's a lot of conversations like that. And so I'm hopeful, but we still have a long way to go. And I think that's because this is really hard stuff. Like it's really hard to get out of these internalized and externalized roles that moms and dads are put into in our culture. And I think ultimately, I just want to always remind people that like, if you're feeling really stuck in some of these same ways, it's not you. It's a societal systemic issue that we're all kind of working on together. And as long as you're not in like an abusive or in a relationship with someone who's purposefully exploiting you and taking advantage of you, I think a lot of this can be slowly changed, but it does take a lot of work. Unfortunately, that work usually comes from the woman or the person who's feeling the pain of this system.
Well, I know this is going to give us a lot to think about. I always like to end my episodes with an opportunity for reflection. So, in this area of motherhood, maybe the double standards of parenting, invisible laborhood, what's one question women could be asking themselves more?
I mean, I think ultimately, what I want for women and moms is just that I want them to be able to enjoy their lives. And I think all of this kind of robs the mental load, the invisible labor, the emotional labor of being the main person in the house, taking care of everybody, can rob women of like their joy. So I really think the question is more about like, what part of all of this do I enjoy? What part of this is like feels like it's the good kind of serving and caring for others? So I think there's a lot of beauty and a lot of good in taking care of your loved ones. So I don't think that's something we don't need to throw all of that out. But I think it's like what part of this feeds me and feels like it's a wonderful, joyful part of my life and a part of this role. Even if it's hard, it's worth it. And what part of this feels like it is unfair or unjust or feels like I'm being taken advantage of, again, not by my husband or my family, but by the world and the expectations of women. And how can I push back against those parts of it? Really taking a deeper look at like there are certain parts of running my household that I enjoy and that I feel like this is something I can do for my family with love and it feels great. And there are other parts that I feel so angry that this is just expected. That's more of the question of the line of questioning I'd love people to think about is like, if there's something in your life that really is taking away from your joy and your life force and sucking you dry and leaving you feeling empty, is that something that you can work with your partner or about or delegate or let go of? Because I think some of this is just the expectations we have for ourselves and the standards we're holding ourselves to that are maybe too high as well.
Lots of great reflection. I know that my community is going to want to follow you and learn more. So, Mary Catherine, where can we find you and support your comics and your book and everything?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. That's the main place to find me, Mom Life Comics. And my website is Mary Catherine Starr. So it's STARR.com. And I'm on Substack as well. And you can find that connected to everything. It's all connected. And then my book's available anywhere you get your books, bookshop.org. Hopefully your independent bookseller. If they don't have it, you can ask them. And then Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all those good places.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. And thanks for your great podcast and great questions.
I'm so glad you joined me today. If you're looking for more, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at @WhitneyWoman. And if you enjoyed the show, I invite you to support me by leaving a review or sharing it with a friend. Hope you have an inspired day.